On coronavirus here on Newsroom Africa. This time, let's take a look at the endangered pangolin, which is now thrust into the limelight around the world after a group of Chinese scientists labeled the mammal a possible transmitter of the deadly virus. The virus has killed over 1,700 people and counting. Experts believe this finding could well mean the end of the pangolin itself. Now, it's the world's most trafficked mammal and prized in China for its meat and scales, which the Chinese believe has medicinal value. To help us understand this and the possible ramifications, as well as other environmental issues, is Simon Gehr, who's in studio with us. And of course, Simon is an environmental scientist. Thanks very much for making time for us. Welcome to Newsroom Africa.
Absolute pleasure. Good to be here.
So let's start right there, right? Let's understand the pangolin, so to speak. Many people might be hearing of this animal for the first time. It certainly suggests to us that the COVID-19, as has been labeled by the World Health Organization, is not deadly to every species, because the pangolin has been living with it, if this is true, for quite a while now.
Yeah, so coronaviruses are what we call zoonotic viruses. Yeah. So they inhabit non-human hosts, but we can catch them across species. So SARS, for example, was transferred from other species through to humans, and this current coronavirus, COVID-19, we know came from the central market in Wuhan, which has things like pangolins. It's a big seafood market as well, and the thinking is that it was probably the pangolins that gave it through to humans. I think this is quite good news for pangolins. Pangolins are little scaly mammals. I mean, they look like a reptile. They look like a little dinosaur.
Right.
But they are actually mammals, and very highly prized in the Middle East for their scales that are used medicinally, and the meat and so on. And so there's a massive problem with these little guys being trafficked out of Africa. The Chinese have just about wiped out their own pangolin species, and so now there's pressure on African species to supply this demand. If it gets into the Chinese psyche that these things carry disease, that can only be good news.
Because most people obviously want to stay away from them.
Yeah. And,
that kind of stays off their population. It does raise questions around the timing, though. I mean, if, people have been engaging with pangolins for so long, and I assume have been ingesting them in the ways that they have, is there any particular reason why there's been a delay before COVID-19 kind of reached humans and started having the effect that it has now?
You might find that the virus hadn't spread through
the pangolin population.
The pangolin population. Maybe what happened was pangolins that hadn't previously been poached in a particular area of the world suddenly made up this market's feed of pangolins. And we see these sort of zoonotic outbreaks happen wherever there are communities that eat bushmeat. So Ebola, for example, came out of West African communities butchering animals and eating without sort of proper abattoirs and so on. Same sort of thing happening here. So there's probably a little population that happens to carry this coronavirus, and that one is the one that happened to be targeted.
And let's talk about the virus itself. I mean, we've got various kind of displays of chemical and formulae, if you like, trying to give us insight into the structure of the virus. What is it about COVID-19 that makes it, I guess, habitable by some animals and simply not habitable by humans, particularly because it's only a strand of coronavirus? I imagine we've sometimes, been affected by other strands of coronavirus and have managed to survive just fine.
Okay, so coronavirus is a big family of viruses. Yeah. And it's very specifically the family that can exist in one species and come across into humans. Sometimes it's just, they will only cause like the common cold, basically. Other times it can be quite serious. So SARS, for example, which stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, that came out in 2002. We caught it from civet cats, we think. And that killed about 10% of the people that were infected by it. This one, COVID-19, seems to kill about 2%, probably even less than that, about 1% of people who are infected by it. But the reason that we're concerned is that we don't know very much about it. And so it's also, I suppose, a practice for the World Health Organization to respond to a big pandemic, to have all of these things in place, how to quarantine people, how to test people at points of entry, all of those sort of things, so that if we do get a virus, a zoonotic virus or any virus that can kill maybe 40 or 50% of people that it infects, we've got these sort of things in place. But this particular virus, yeah, it kills probably about as many people, or the proportion of people, as the annual flu virus that we all get inoculated against each year.
And the concern, like you've mentioned right now, is that we actually don't really understand it, and that's obviously a clear fear. Climate change and the like, I mean, how are those kind of dynamics making things complicated, if they are really? You might find that the effect might not necessarily be noticeable.
Yeah, probably not climate change, but I think humans encroaching in on environments that they didn't normally be in, or starting to eat species that they wouldn't normally eat. So things like pangolins, I mean, they've never been a major source of African diets, for example, even though we've got lots of pangolins. So that's a problem. People beginning to go and live in parts of the Amazon or parts of the Congo that they didn't usually live in. All of those things expose humans to new pathogens. And that's the environmental problem that's probably causing these sort of spreads of viruses, rather than climate change specifically.
Right, and a big part of our focus today, as we do this special broadcast, is actually not to add fear or stir panic, but rather to give people information about what they can do to sort of guard against some of these things themselves. From an environmental perspective, I mean, if people usually frequent the outdoors and explore some of the things that they've never done whilst they do that, what kind of preventative measures can they take in those kind of settings to ensure that they don't even put themselves at risk of contracting any kind of virus from animals that might be dangerous to their own health?
Yeah, well, certainly, I mean, don't be eating bushmeat. Right. That's a very good environmental reason for that, but and conservation reason for that. But it's a good health principle. Don't eat monkeys, don't eat chimpanzees, or any poached venison. If you are out and about, you're around, and you yourself are coughing, you cough the Dracula cough, we call it, into the crook of your arm, because that's not infecting your hands.
Right.
In fact, there's a culture particularly in Japan, that if you are sick, you wear a mask. Rather than less. So when you see Japanese people wearing masks, it's often that person who's sick, and it's being good manners to other people. That's probably not a bad principle to have. Really, you only have to be concerned for the coronavirus if you've been in contact with someone who's been in East Asia in the last little while. If you are experiencing flu-like symptoms, obviously go to the doctor. You may as well get yourself tested if you've either been in China or you've been in contact with someone from China. In England, for example, or in the UK, 99% of people tested for the coronavirus came up negative.
Right.
So there's a very, very small chance that you've got it, but certainly alert your doctor to the fact that you have been exposed to that population if you are presenting with those symptoms.
Right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for bringing us into the picture there. Simon Keir is an environmental scientist helping us understand, of course, a different aspect of the coronavirus as we attempt to do exactly that throughout the day today. Thanks once again.
Cheers.